Chapter 4, Rotting Vegetables. In the third year of Lord Tail's stewardship, when the harvest season drew near and every farmer's thoughts turned to what the soil would yield, there lived a man called Elian. He was of middling years, with a rough beard gone grey at the edges and hands permanently stained with the soil of his land. Of his children, only one remained, a daughter called Tilly, scarce 5 winters old. 6 others lay beneath the earth behind his cottage, taken by fever, flux, and the coughing sickness before they'd seen their 3rd year. His wife had died birthing the last of them, and Elian had buried her beside the small graves with hands that shook and a heart that would never fully mend. The world was bright and alive with the morning sun, but Elian's thoughts were on the endless ruts in the road and the gnawing worry in his belly. The journey to market was always a long one, a 2-day trek that ended with the hope of coins enough to see his family through winter. Beside him on the cart, Tilly chattered happily to the world passing by, her voice like birdsong in the morning air. The mule, a tough-looking beast named Barnaby, pulled the cart with a slow, rhythmic gait that was more stubborn than steady. Elian lived a simple life, and that meant he lived with his head down, focused on the immediate task at hand. His worries were simple: a late frost that might kill the spring planting, a sick mule that couldn't be replaced, a low price for his turnips at the market that would leave him unable to pay the Lord's levy. So when a lone traveller appeared on the road ahead, Elian's first instinct was one of simple caution. The man was walking in the same direction, his back to them. He was tall but thin, his garments dusty but clean. He carried a large, well-worn pack and an unremarkable walking stick. He didn't look like a soldier or a bandit. He just looked tired. Tired as a man who has walked the length of the world and found no rest at the end of it. As the cart drew near, the man turned and waited. His face was pale, his hair a mess of tangles, but his eyes were a startling, deep blue, the kind of blue that made you think of winter skies and deep water. The offer. "Good morrow," the traveller said, his voice quiet as falling snow. He didn't ask for a ride outright. He simply looked at the cart, then at Elian's calloused hands, and then at the few blighted turnips atop a sack. "Your crops are failing, aren't they?" he said, his voice dropping lower. He gestured to the vegetables with one long finger. "The root rot. It's creeping in from the east, from the swamplands. The same corruption that's emptied 3 villages this past year alone." Elian's breath caught in his throat. He'd heard rumors of villages failing, of families fleeing westward with naught but the clothes on their backs. But he'd thought them far off, not something that could reach his own fields. The traveller continued, his eyes never leaving the blighted turnips. "I can give you the remedy for it, a simple mixture that will push the rot back from your soil, at least for a time, in exchange for a half-day's ride toward Barrow's End." Elian stared at the traveller, then at the blighted turnips, and a deep-seated suspicion warred with a farmer's desperate need. The blighted patch of his field was a gnawing worry that kept him awake at night. If it spread to the whole field, his family would starve come winter. The thought of an easy cure, even one offered by a strange wanderer, was a powerful law. The man didn't look like a sorcerer. He just looked like he had seen too many roads and borne too many burdens. It was a risk, aye, but a calculated one. And what choice did he truly have? Elian sighed, a sound of resignation and weary hope mingled together. "Fine," he said, pulling on the reins to slow the mule. "Get in." The traveller nodded and, with surprising grace for a man so tall and burdened, climbed into the back of the cart. He settled in amongst the sacks of grain and vegetables, arranging his pack carefully. He didn't look at Elian or the girl, just at the mule's plodding hooves and the road stretching ahead. For a few minutes, the only sound was the creak of the cart and the rhythmic clop of Barnaby's hooves on the packed earth. Elian kept his eyes on the road, his grip tight on the reins, acutely aware of the stranger sitting behind him. He thought of bandits who might use such tricks to gain trust, of wandering madmen who spoke sense one moment and gibberish the next. But his daughter Tilly had no such caution, as children often have not. She turned on her knees and stared at the traveler with the wide-eyed curiosity of one too young to know fear. "Are you lost, mister?" she asked, her voice clear as temple bells. The traveler didn't answer. She pointed at his pack with a small finger. "What's in your bag? Is it full of magic?" Elian's grip on the reins tightened. He turned his head and gave Tilly a stern look. "That's enough questions, girl. Leave the man be and mind your manners." The traveler raised a hand, the gesture gentle. "It's all right," he said, his voice as calm as a still pond at dawn. He looked down at Tilly, who was now picking at a loose thread on her dress. "Am I lost? That's a good question. Well, I and know both. I know where I am going, whence I came, and where I am presently. I am just not certain if these places are the right ones for me to be in. But it feels proper, so I reckon I am not lost. There are things I am still learning about this world, and I am lost in these unknown matters, so in a sense, I'm a bit lost, I suppose. The realms of the known and the unknown are mixed like water and wine, so knowing seeps into the unknown and the unknown seeps into what is already known." Elian furrowed his brow, trying to make sense of the strange words. He understood hard work, cold winters, and the slow turn of the seasons. This was something else entirely, a dizzying tangle of words that seemed to go everywhere and nowhere at once. Out of his confusion, he just blurted out the only things he knew for certain. "We're going to Barrow's End. For the market. These lands belong to Lord Tail." Tilly, however, seemed to understand perfectly, as children sometimes do. She pointed a small finger at the traveler. "My doll got lost in the field yesterday," she announced proudly. "But then I found her. So she's not lost anymore, is she?" She then looked over at her father, her small face serious as a judge. "Papa, are you lost?" The traveler looked at Tilly, his deep blue eyes seeming to look right through her to something beyond. "How does your doll know she is not lost?" he asked, his voice low and soft as wind through grass. "It was not she who found the way back, it was you who found her. Can she trust being unlost if it's not she who found the way?" Tilly blinked slowly, her head tilted to the side like a curious bird. She looked down at the simple cloth doll in her lap and squeezed it gently. She thought for a long moment, a serious frown on her small face, as though pondering the greatest mystery in all the world. "She knows," Tilly said finally, her voice confident and simple, "because my hands are holding her." The traveler's lips twitched in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "No magic in my bag," he said, his voice a soft murmur. "There's a kettle, water, food, papers, and ricing equipment. No magic at all. But," he added, his voice dropping even lower, "I am looking for it." He settled back into the creaking cart, his eyes distant. Tilly's small hand reached out and touched the gnarled wood of his walking stick. "Why do you have that stick?" she asked. "Is it tired of walking too?" The traveler looked at the stick in his hand, and a tired sigh escaped his lips like air from a punctured bladder. "It's not for walking," he answered, his voice barely a whisper. "It's a record of my steps. Each knot is a place I have been, each line is a day I have endured. It keeps account of a journey I have not yet finished, and perhaps never shall." Tilly's eyes, wide with confusion, looked up at his face. "Are you sad?" she asked, her voice blunt and innocent as only a child's can be. The traveler looked away, his gaze falling on the distant hills. "I am not always sad," he said slowly. "Sometimes the charts I make reveal a pattern, a new current of power flowing beneath the surface of things, and in that moment, there is a kind of quiet joy. But the work is very long, and the true joy of knowing is a fleeting thing, gone as soon as grasped. Sadness is what is left behind when the joy departs." Tilly pondered this for a moment, her small brow furrowed. "Why are you all alone?" She finally asked. My papa says it's not good to be alone. He says people need people, like plants need rain. The traveler's shoulders seemed to slump even more, as though the weight on them had suddenly doubled. He stared at the far horizon, where the road disappeared into heat haze. Being with others can be difficult, he said slowly, choosing each word with care. It can blur the lines of my work, the things that are known and those that are not. The maps are very particular, and so must the cartographer be. Precision requires solitude. He turned his weary eyes to Elian, who was still staring straight ahead, his face a mask of worried confusion. Elian's hand, still on the reins, twitched. He had not heard the word cartographer before. It sounded too learned, too grand for a simple man of the soil to comprehend. He looked at the traveler, his suspicion returning like bile in his throat, and asked, "What is that? What do you do?" The traveler turned his head slowly, as though the motion cost him effort. "A cartographer is one who draws maps," he said, his voice quiet. "Maps of the lands, of the roads, the rivers, the mountains. It's a way of making sense of the world, of putting things where they belong on the page." He paused, his eyes falling to the ground again. "But I map not the things you can see," he continued, and now his voice had taken on a strange quality, like he was speaking from very far away. "I map the things you cannot, the currents of power that flow beneath the earth, the lines of force that connect one place to another, the patterns that govern how magic moves through the world like water through stone." Elian felt a chill run down his spine despite the warmth of the sun. This was dangerous talk, the kind of talk that got people burned or hanged or cast out to wander until they died of exposure. But the traveler was not finished. "The eastern lands," he said, his voice taking on an urgency that had not been there before. "They are waking. The old things that were buried there are stirring in their sleep. The rot in your turnips, it's not natural decay. It's the breath of something ancient seeping up through the soil. The same breath that makes wells go brackish, that causes livestock to birth malformed young, that drives people mad with dreams they cannot escape." He looked at Elian directly now, and his blue eyes were intense. The villages that failed Greyhaven, Thornwick, Ashwood, they were not struck by plague or famine. They crossed a threshold. They were too close to the source, and the corruption took root in the very ground beneath their feet. Your field sits on the edge of that same corruption. Each year, the line moves westward, closer. "Can it be stopped?" Elian asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The traveler was silent for a long moment. "For a time," he said finally. "I can treat your field, push the rot back, but it will return. It always returns, like the tide. The eastern lands are waking, and their breath carries death to all things that live in this new age." The village. They reached the village as the sun was climbing toward its zenith. Barrow's End was not large, perhaps 40 cottages clustered around a common green, a small temple with its roof in need of repair, and the Lord's Timber Hall that served as both manor house and court of law. Elian pulled the cart to a stop near the common well, where already a small crowd had gathered, other farmers bringing their goods to market, merchants setting up their stalls, children running and playing in the dust. The traveler climbed down from the cart with surprising grace. "The remedy," he said, pulling a small leather pouch from his pack. "Mix 1 handful of this with clay from your field. Spread it on the blighted patch at dusk when the sun is setting but before full dark comes. Speak no words while you do this. The rot feeds on doubt and fear, so your mind must be still." Elian took the pouch, its contents light and dry against his palm. "What do I owe you for this?" "The ride was payment enough," the traveler said. He looked around the village, his eyes taking in the timber hall, the temple, the merchants' stalls. "Is there an inn hereabouts? A place where a traveler might rest for a night?" "Aye," Elian said, pointing. "The Green Dragon, just past the smith's forge. Old Marta runs it. Tell her Elian sent you, and she won't charge you overmuch." The traveler nodded his thanks. Then, as if remembering something, he turned back. "Your daughter," he said quietly. "She has a fever coming. I can smell it on her, though it hasn't yet shown itself. Give her willow bark tea tonight, and keep her warm. The fever will break by morning if you do this." Elian's blood ran cold. Tilly had seemed well all morning, laughing and playing. But now that the traveler mentioned it, he could see a faint flush on her cheeks that he'd mistaken for the warmth of the day. "How did you?" But the traveler was already walking away, his pack on his back, heading toward the inn. Tilly tugged at her father's sleeve. "I like him, Papa. He's strange, but he's nice." Elian watched the traveler disappear into the crowd. "Aye," he muttered. "Strange indeed." The return home. Elian spent the day at market, selling what he could, buying what supplies he needed. But his mind kept returning to the traveler's words. The rot, the eastern corruption, the villages that had failed, and Tilly's coming fever. As the afternoon wore on, he noticed it more clearly. Tilly was quieter than usual, less energetic. She complained her head hurt. By the time they loaded up the cart for the journey home, her forehead was warm to the touch. Fear gripped his heart like a vice. He'd buried 6 children already. He couldn't lose Tilly. Not her. Not his last one. They made camp by the roadside that night, and Elian built a fire with shaking hands. He'd bought willow bark at the market more from habit than because he'd truly believed the traveler, and now he brewed it into tea, making Tilly drink it all despite her protests at the bitter taste. "I don't feel good, Papa," she whimpered, curled up in her blanket by the fire. "I know, sweetling," he said, his voice thick with fear he tried to hide. "But the tea will help. Sleep now. You'll feel better come morning." He held her hand through the night, feeling her small body burn with fever. Every hour that passed felt like a year. He prayed to gods he wasn't sure existed, made promises he had no way of keeping, begged the universe for mercy. And as dawn broke, grey and cold, Tilly's fever broke with it. She opened her eyes, clear and bright, and smiled up at him. "I'm hungry, Papa." Elian wept with relief. The field. 2 days later, they were home. Elian set Tilly inside with stern instructions to stay warm and rest, then went out to his field with the leather pouch and a bucket of clay. The blighted patch was worse than when he'd left. The rot had spread, claiming 2 more rows of turnips. The vegetables were soft and discolored, reeking of decay that smelled wrong, not like normal rot, but like something chemical, something unnatural. He mixed the remedy with clay as the traveler had instructed, and as the sun began to set, he spread it on the blighted earth. He worked in silence, as he'd been told, keeping his mind as still and empty as he could manage. The mixture was warm in his hands. Not hot, but warm, like something alive. As he spread it, he thought he could feel something in the soil beneath, something that recoiled from the remedy, something that withdrew like a snake sliding back into its hole. When he finished, the last light was fading from the sky. He stood there in his field, his hands stained with the strange mixture, and looked toward the east, toward the swamplands, toward whatever was waking there. The traveler had said it would return, that it always returned, like the tide. But for now, for this season, his field was saved. His daughter was saved. That would have to be enough. As he walked back to his cottage, Tilly's voice called from inside, asking if he wanted stew for supper. He stopped once, near the door. A patch of earth beside the front step had gone dark, not wet dark, but the wrong dark, a color the soil had no business being. The size of a man's handprint. He had not noticed it that morning. He went inside,